Okay, here are the answers to the level 9 and 9.25 questions. Now, if you got all of these right, then you would be more or less at the level that we'd expect at the end of year 9. Question 12, midpoint of the line segment. Now, really, this is straightforward because it tells you what you need to do. So the midpoint, so using the midpoint formula, this should be in your bound reference. You may also be able to figure this one out just by looking at the points. That will get you the answer, but it's not going to work all the time. So you're always better to use the formula. So the midpoint is located at the average of the x values and the average of the y values. So all you've got to do is put them in. Now, it doesn't really matter which order you put them in because they're still going to average out the same. So I'm just going to work from left to right in terms of the coordinates. Now, that also works out in terms of how I've described x1 and y1 and stuff like that in the past anyway. What you've got to be a little bit careful with here is the directed numbers because we've got directed numbers in all of these cases. Now you might have noticed that the y value is -5 in both cases, so it is a horizontal line, but we can still use the formula to work it out. All you've got to be careful with here is -1 plus 3, so we're starting off at a negative number, but we're adding 2, so we go up to 2. Now -5 plus -5 is -10 because the plus minus becomes a minus, so we get to -10. Then we just need to simplify that slightly. So 2 over 2 is 1, -10 over 2 is -5. So the coordinate that relates to that is, our answer is C. Question 13. Now again, the question tells you what you need to do. We're looking for the distance between 2 points. Now for this we've got the distance formula, which is just using Pythagoras, because you've got to remember that any time you get 2 points on a Cartesian plane, that we can create a right angle triangle and then use Pythagoras to find the distance. So all we're doing here is that we are basically doing our run squared plus our rise squared in the under the root sign here, because they are our 2 short sides of the triangle. Okay, so all we've got to do, if I'm working out my my rise first, say it's going to be 6 minus 3 squared plus, and my run squared is 4 minus 2 squared. Now you've just got to be careful here again of your directed numbers. So 6 minus 3 is easy, that's 3 squared. Now 4 minus 2 is 6 squared. And we add those up. 3 squared is 9, 6 squared is 36, and we get the square root of 45. So our answer is A. Moving on to question 14. Now, question 14 is one of the ones that's really tying everything together to find the equation of a linear graph. Now, this is what I went over in class in the last lesson. Now, it does give you a nice big hint here. Your first step should be to work out the gradient, which is what you need to do in any case when you start off with 2 coordinates. So, okay, work out my gradient first. So let's label these 2. Now, I'm going to, this is x1 because the x value here is lower than the x value there, and so therefore this is y1. This is x2 and this is y2. Now working out the gradient is easy. We just use our formula, which should be accurate in your bound reference. Where people tend to get this wrong is just by substituting incorrectly. So you've just got to make sure that y2 actually goes in the y2 spot. So in this case, y2 is -2, then minus y1, which is -7. Then we have x2 is 2 minus x1, which is -2. Now we've got a lot of negative directed numbers going on in here, and remember that minus minus becomes a plus. So this simplifies to -2 plus 7 and 2 plus 2. And so what we get is -2 plus 7 is 5, and 2 plus 2 is 4. So we've got a gradient of 5 over 4. Okay, so we figured out that the gradient was 5 over 4. Sorry, I hit the wrong button and it deleted everything. So I can write y equals 5 over 4, and I made the same silly mistake, 5 over 4x plus c. Now, in order to find c, we need to choose an x and a y value that makes sense, and we could use either of these coordinates. Now, I would use this one because it's got less negative numbers in it. So we know that y equals -2 and x equals 2. So we can substitute these values in. So y equals 5 over 4 times 2 plus c. So then we need to rearrange this. So we've got -2 equals 10 over 4 plus c. Now -2 equals, no, 10 over 4 is 2.5. plus c. Now, to get this 2.5 off the right hand side of the equation, we need to do the opposite operation, which is to subtract 2.5 from both sides. Now, I'm just going to write this in red to kind of make it really obvious what I'm doing, although you don't need to do this in each case. So if I do this to both sides, what is going to happen is that 2.5 minus 2.5 is going to cancel because the answer is 0. So all I'm left with is c on one side and then this minus 2.5 minus 2 on the other side. Now, at any time you can swap the left hand and right hand sides of an equation and it has no effect. So I'm just going to write it as c equals. So if I go minus 2.5 minus 2, well, that's going more negative, so my answer for C is going to be minus 4.5 or minus 4.5. Sorry, I'm jumping between fractions and decimals. So the final answer for this question is we've got to write our equation, oh dear, 5 over 4x, not 5 over x, minus 4, 4.5 if I'm doing it in fractions. But look, we're going to accept any, you could do it as a decimal, you could do it as 1.25x minus 4.5. That would be fine. So any answer that is correct will be acceptable there. Okay, so moving on to question 15. So question 15 is actually the same question as the previous one, or the same form of the question, except they're already giving you some of the information. So they've told you that the gradient is -3. But then the tricky bit is that they're telling you the x-intercept, not the y-intercept. Now what the x-intercept means is that we know that the graph is going through the coordinate -4, 0. So this gives us an x value and a y value that we can use to solve for c. So doing what we did in the previous example, I'm going to write down what I know. So I know y equals -3x plus c. Now I know that I've got an x value and a y value here, so I can sub those in. So 0 equals -3 times -4 plus c. Okay, 0, 0, -3 times -4 is +12 plus c. Now to get rid of the 12, I've got to subtract it from both sides. So what I'm going to be ending up with, now I've kind of skipped over any real working there, but because I'm subtracting 12 from both sides, this disappears and I'm left with -12 on the other side. So c is -12. So writing my equation in full, I was given the gradient of -3, and then I figured out that the intercept is -12. So I have got A as my correct answer there. Now moving on, the last question. Now this isn't actually a terribly tricky question, but it's confusing because it's talking about a circle. But it's really the question itself that's confusing, not just in the way that it's written. The math is actually pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's think about these points. So we've got a point at -1, 3. Now that's going to be about here, say. So this is point A. And then I've got a point at 5, -3, which is, let's say that's about there, and we're going to call that B. Now this is on a circle. Now I'm going to badly draw a circle around there. So here we go. We can convince ourselves that that's a circle. Now What we're interested in is the distance between these 2 points here. Now, this is the diameter of the circle. Again, imagine that that's a straight line and we'll all be happy. Okay, so the straight line between 2 points, remember that is just the distance between 2 points. So there's nothing too tricky in this question in terms of what we're doing in terms of math or anything like that. All we've got to remember is that AB is just the distance formula. So again, it's the rise squared plus the run squared. Now, if I think about my two coordinates, now A and B, they're actually in the right order of, x1, y1, and x2, y2. So all I've got to do is I'm just going to do, well, I'll do the run first. So if I go 5 minus 1 squared plus minus 3 squared, and I get 6 squared plus minus 6 squared, and I get 6 squared is 36 plus negative 6 squared is also 36. I get the square root of 72. Now I need to grab my calculator to work that one out, because it's not something that is easy to do in my head. So I do the square root of 72 and I get 8.48. Now, this isn't my final answer because I'm interested in the radius. So the radius is going to be half the diameter, which is going to be 8.48 over 2, which is 4.24 or thereabouts.